Two more big free agents come off the board in Corbin Burnes and Teoscar Hernandez. I'll tell you how this could impact the Atlanta Braves, and also we'll spotlight Blake Burkhalter, top pitching prospect for the Atlanta Braves. Could he have an impact in 2025? We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. And after the Falcons game the other night, maybe it's time to start looking at the Atlanta Braves. As always, make sure you follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button as well. Leave me a comment down below. I do appreciate it. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the signings of Corbin Burnes and Teoscar Hernandez, and specifically the Burnes one and how that could impact the Atlanta Braves if the Diamondbacks are more willing to move some players now. We'll discuss all that. Also, Minors Monday Spotlight. We'll take a look at Blake Burkhalter, who had a great 2024 campaign. Could he be knocking on the door in 2025 for a pro debut? Also, some rumblings happening. Don't know how much stock to put into them, but we'll get into a lot of that in the final segment. Roki Sasaki seems his meetings are all done, at least for the moment. So we'll get into all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. But let's start with the big signings from over the weekend that we haven't talked about yet. And let's first talk about Teoscar Hernandez here, because this to me was the last big free agent out there that I think made a lot of sense for the Braves. A move I feel like they could have afforded, but the Dodgers ultimately bring him back. 3 years, $66 million, $23 million of it deferred, $23 million signing bonus. Dodgers doing their usual thing to get a player to come in. This is the situation. Like I said, money-wise, I think the Braves could have done this. It's in around that range where AA seems to be capping at $22 million a year. Not a long-term deal. Makes a lot of sense. It's the type of bat that the Braves typically want, with a lot of power in there. I just think Teoscar Hernandez made a ton of sense for the Braves. But here's the thing. In free agency, we normally look at it and say teams who offer the most money, that they're going to get the player that they want. That's not always the case. And look, we don't know. I don't know. We probably will never know if the Braves made a legitimate run and offer at Teoscar Hernandez, if they would have been willing to match what the Dodgers gave them or not. But what we do know is that Teoscar really wanted to go back to the Dodgers. He wanted to go back to LA. And it really was just a matter of how much were the Dodgers going to offer him. But it always felt like he was going to go back to the Dodgers. It's where he wanted to be. Look, the Braves have benefited greatly from players who wanted to take less money to be with them. So you can't really criticize it when it happens for somebody else. And look, again, I don't know if another team offered Teoscar more than that. It seems like a pretty fair deal, and we haven't seen many fair deals this offseason. So, like I said, this may just be one of those situations. He wanted to play in LA, wanted to play with the Dodgers again, so he just took the best offer that they were willing to give him. But it felt like one that the Braves could have made, and it certainly was a player that I think made a lot of sense for the Braves. But again, in free agency, yes, you can just sit there and take the biggest paycheck that comes your way, but you also can choose, especially if the money is similar, where you want to go. I think it's, Brave, you look at it in the Dansby Swanson situation, and a lot of Braves fans kind of upset with him because he took the bag, but he had every right to, and it's not like it was close. I mean, from what all we understand, the Braves weren't willing to go much over $100 million for Dansby Swanson, and the Cubs gave him over $170 million. We're talking about, possibly a $50 million gap. That's a huge gap. Not many people are going to leave that on the table, even though I think Dansby wanted to be in Atlanta. I think he made it clear he wanted to be in Atlanta, but that's not always the case, in free agency. And we see it with Teoscar, and I think we also might have seen it with Corbin Burnes, who gets 6 years, $210 million to play for the Diamondbacks. I think that caught a lot of people off guard, and reports are he reached out to Arizona. He has a house in Scottsdale where he lives, and so he reached out to Arizona and wanted to see if he could make something happen there, and ultimately they did. And I think part of why this works out for Corbin Burnes is that there's an opt-out after 2026. So he could spend 2 years in Arizona if he keeps pitching well, like he has been. There's a chance for him to get another 6-year, $200 million deal. So it makes a lot of sense for Corbin Burnes. He gets to go play where he lives, where he wants to, make over $200 million. And there's a chance for him in 2 years to hit the open market again. And again, if he continues to produce like he has been, he's going to get another major deal. It's $35 million a year. It's not like, this is not a lot of money. It's Max Fried got more, but it's also 2 years less. $35 million a year is the 6th largest AAV ever given out to a starting pitcher. But again, I think where it was, being in Arizona, where he lives, was big. And I think getting that opt-out after 2026 was big for him as well, because it's a chance for him to go to the market again and get another big deal, a 6-year deal, for similar type of money. So it made a lot of sense for Corbin Burnes. I thought he was going back, or I thought he was going to the Giants. There's a lot of rumors, reports that he wanted to be on the West Coast, but ultimately he goes to Arizona. But what does this mean for the Atlanta Braves? I have to figure the Diamondbacks are more motivated now to trade one of their starters. You look at their rotation at the moment: Corbin Burnes, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, Brandon Pfaadt, Ryan Nelson, and Jordan Montgomery. They have a lot of pitchers there. Now, as you know, you need a lot of pitchers to get through a season. So there's a chance that maybe they hold on to all these guys. I feel like this also has to mean that the Diamondbacks need to go for it. You don't sign somebody like Corbin Burnes. And I know maybe it was kind of just plopped in their lap. It was an opportunity that they couldn't pass up. He wanted to be there, was willing to take, fewer years, even if it is a higher AAV. And maybe you only get him, understanding maybe you only get him for 2 years. And look, Zach Gallen is potentially a free agent after the upcoming season. Merrill Kelly's possibly a free agent after the upcoming season. But you go get a guy like Corbin Burnes, and you're only really guaranteed to have him for 2 years. I think the Diamondbacks have to go for it now. And they're a tough division with the Padres and the Dodgers. The Giants are wanting to compete. You always have the Rockies there that you can beat up on, but it's a tough division. And now you've gone out and spent a lot of money on Corbin Burnes. But Merrill Kelly, I talked about, I would love Merrill Kelly, makes $7 million next year. I just think he's a really good pitcher, not overpowering. Jordan Montgomery said to make $22.5 million. I want no part of the Erod contract. That's probably the one that they want to get rid of the most because it has the most years on it. But I think Jordan Montgomery is the one that gets moved. Gallen, as I mentioned, in his last year of arbitration, projected to make 14.1. I don't think they were going to move him after they go out and get Corbin Burnes. Pfaadt and Nelson are both pre-arb. I don't think they'd want to move them either. I love the idea of getting Jordan Montgomery. I've talked about him a lot this offseason. I've talked way too much about Jordan Montgomery this offseason. If the Diamondbacks eat $5 to $7 million of that, and you don't have to give up a top prospect, I'm all for that. We're going to talk about Blake Burkhalter, and maybe this is kind of foreshadowing how my conversation is going to go, but I'd even be okay if you give up a Blake Burkhalter or a Drew Hackenberg for Montgomery if they're going to throw in $7.5 million. I like those guys, and I think they got a chance to pitch in the big leagues. I don't see a ton of upside with either one of them. Again, spoiler alert for the next segment. But I would do a deal like that. But either way, if you can get Jordan Montgomery, not have to give up one of your top prospects, and they eat, around $7 million of that deal, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'd also love Kelly. Again, I prefer Merrill Kelly in that, but if the Diamondbacks are going for it, they need to hang on to him, and I think they should. A package deal of Geraldo Perdomo and Monty is a great fit for the Atlanta Braves. Like I said, with Perdomo, even if you don't think he's a shortstop of the future, which I'm not convinced that he could be, but if the Diamondbacks are ready to hand things over to Lawler, and they probably aren't, if they're going to try to compete right out of the gate in 2025, which they should now with Burnes in tow, then I think you have to put Perdomo out there and make Lawler earn that spot, which I don't think he's quite done yet. So I don't know that they'd be as interested in moving Perdomo, at least right now. Maybe that's an in-season type of deal, but I would love a package deal. I think that's still one of the better options for the Braves this offseason, a package deal of Perdomo and Jordan Montgomery. It gives you that veteran starter that can hopefully give you some innings if he can stay healthy this year, which he hadn't really had too much of a problem with or the past 4 or 5 years before that. And you get somebody in Perdomo who could take over at shortstop for you at the very least, can play all over the infield, has good bat-to-ball skills and some speed, and is really good defensively at shortstop. at the very least, push Orlando Arcia. I think he'd be the starter over Arcia. I do think he's an upgrade over him. But that to me is one of the best options for the Braves this offseason, is doing some sort of package deal for Perdomo and Jordan Montgomery, get the Diamondbacks to eat a little bit of Montgomery's contract, bring that AAV down. I don't know how much of a return they would want if you threw Perdomo in that. But again, getting those two players, something like that, I think would make a lot of sense for the Atlanta Braves. Braves Thrill says maybe get one of their outfielders as well. Alek Thomas would be an interesting one in that, a left-handed bat. Braves obviously, could use another left-handed bat, has some good speed, and he's kind of pushed out in that outfield mix. So that could also be an option as well for the Braves. Just get all three. Why don't you just go ahead and get Alek Thomas, Perdomo, and Jordan Montgomery, and there you go. But I do think there's something there with the Diamondbacks that the Braves could make work. They could help them in multiple areas. And now with the move of Corbin Burnes, you'd feel like they would want to move some of that money from Jordan Montgomery this upcoming season. And I think the Braves could benefit greatly from that. All right, next we will go into our Minors Monday spotlight, looking at Blake Burkhalter, a guy that I just tried to trade, but I promise I do like him. I think there could be a role for him with the Braves in the future. We'll discuss him here next. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely has happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal financial app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this upcoming new year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Well, thank you as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Now after this is over, go check out Locked On MLB and make them your second listen of the day, solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. See Braves still saying RIP to Braves legend Jimmy Carter, as he did die over the weekend at the age of 100. So certainly prayers and thoughts to his family. Let's jump into our Minors Monday spotlight here. We're going to take a look at Blake Burkhalter. I've had several requests, people wanting me to break down Blake Burkhalter after the big year he had in 2024. But let's go back a little bit further than that. 24-year-old right-handed pitcher, 6 foot, 204 pounds, 76th overall pick in 2022 out of Auburn. War Eagle he was the comp pick for Freddie Freeman, signing with the Dodgers in 2022 at Auburn. He had a 3.69 ERA, a 0.91 whip, and 46 and a third innings with just 7 walks and 71 strikeouts to go along with 16 saves. Was just a dynamite closer for Auburn that year. Atlanta drafted him as a starter and said they were going to give him a chance to start, which they have to this point. He threw just 4 2/3 innings after getting drafted and then missed all of 2023 after having Tommy John surgery. In 2024, he returned in late May, made 14 starts at Rome, had a 2.71 ERA, a 1.18 whip, 69 2/3 innings pitched, just 16 walks to 63 strikeouts, a 253 average against, not great, 8.63 walk per nine, not great, 8.63 K per nine, not great, 2.25 walk per nine is fantastic, and a 0.38 home run per nine is also fantastic. He only allowed 3 home runs, so did a great job of keeping the ball in the park. He did pitch in game 1 of Rome's playoff series as well and allowed just 1 earned run on 4 hits with no walks over 5 innings with 4 strikeouts. The only run he gave up, though, a solo home run. So he did a great job all year of not giving up home runs, but gave up one in the playoff game. He pitched well in that one, but unfortunately Rome took the loss. You look at the pitch mix for Blake Burkhalter, a 4-seam fastball, sits mostly 93, 94, but he can crank it up to 97, 98. He hit 97 in the games. One of the games that I watched that's as high as I saw him get up to, but I've read some reports that, he's hit 98, 97, 98, somewhere in that range. He can get into the to upper 90s, but mostly sits 93, 94. It seemed to sneak up on hitters as well and has a little bit of arm side run. I didn't see that as much with him, but again, there's some of the reports I've read that it has some arm side run on it, but I didn't see as much with that like I've seen with others that we've already talked about this offseason. A cutter in the low 90s looked like his most confident secondary pitch. He'd throw it to righties and lefties, got plenty of called strikes with it. It seemed to just catch hitters off guard with that pitch. A cutter has always been a pitch for me that is tough to read. I don't know why, but it's tough for me to read watching on TV. Kenley Jansen's one. He has one of the best cutters. And when he throws it, it just looks like a slower fastball to me. But there has to be some sort of movement, cutting action on it. I don't know if you agree with that or not. It's always, cutters is something visually that's always been hard for me to pick up. But it seemed to be a good offering for him. And again, it seemed to sneak up on a lot of hitters as well. The changeup, his only off-speed pitch that he threw in the low 80s. To me, this acted more like a 12-6 curveball. When he threw it well, when he started at the knees, it dropped off the table and could be a really good pitch, but it's also one that I saw him hang a lot. A couple of them got crushed. He did freeze one guy because he just hung it so much. The guy didn't see it coming, and he doesn't throw a lot of them to begin with. But when located well, like I said, it can be a really good changeup because it has a lot of just drop to it. I didn't see as much fade. Normally a right-handed pitcher with a changeup, you're going to see some drop and some fade going down and into righties. This to me looked more like just drop, like it drops off the table. And again, when thrown correctly, when he starts it at the knees and it just kind of drops off, it can be a really good pitch for him. So four-seam cutter, changeup. I'll be honest. I wanted to see something special when I watched Blake Burkhalter being an Auburn Tiger, seeing the great year that he had. I was hoping to see something from him that just blew me away. And I didn't quite get that from him. The fastball didn't seem overly special. The cutter didn't seem overly special. Like I said, the changeup, I think if he gets more consistent with it, maybe that could be a special pitch for him because it had a lot of really good drop to it. But I just didn't see anything that blew me away. I've also always viewed him as a reliever, and I think that's the best spot for him in the future. I could see him being a solid setup guy, and I think that is the most likely outcome for him. His delivery is a bit odd. When you watch him, it's kind of, if you've ever watched Cutter Crawford for the Red Sox pitch, it's kind of similar to that, where he kind of tucks his arm in instead of extending it all the way out. It's not quite to the degree of Cutter Crawford, but he kind of hinds it behind his body. And again, just doesn't stretch that right arm all the way out, just keeps it tucked in, which I think is kind of helps with that deceptiveness and maybe why you see that fastball even in 93, 94 kind of get on hitters because he hides it really well behind his body. But just a little bit of an odd delivery for him. With his current pitch mix, I think the ceiling as a starter for Burkhalter is a 4th, 5th starter type. I'm just not seeing a guy with a lot of upside to become a 2, 3 type of starter. I see a guy that, 4th or 5th. He has the command to be able to pitch and be a starter. I just don't see that elite pitch to give him that upside as a middle or even top of the rotation type of starter. I think he's most likely going to be a back-end starter. But again, I think the best possible outcome, and maybe the most likely outcome, is that he becomes a setup reliever, perhaps a multi-inning type of guy. So I do think he pitches in the big leagues because I think he has the command. I think he has enough stuff that he can get by at the big leagues. But I just wasn't seeing anything to really blow me away with him. Let me know what you think, if you've watched any of Blake Burkhalter. Again, I wanted to be excited about him. He had a great year coming. This is also his first year coming off of Tommy John surgery. So you throw that in there. And the fact that the command was still good, I think is big for him. Maybe in the next year, if we see him sit more 95 and can touch 97, 98 more regularly, and that fastball plays a little bit up, and you see him become more consistent with that changeup and his off-speed pitches, or develop some more off-speed pitches, then maybe there's a little bit more with him. But I just didn't see it this year from Blake Burkhalter. I don't see a big upside guy here. I see a back-end starter, setup, middle reliever type of profile. But here's what I do want to see from him in 2025, because players, as always, as we talk about, they can grow and certainly become better. I'd love to see the velo tick up a little bit. You say that with a lot of starters. It's not like this is a young guy, though. It's not like a Didier Fuentes we talked about last week. It's not like this is a young guy who you can project, to add a tick more on his fastball. But I certainly would love that. I'd love to see him sit more 94, 95 and be able to reach back for 97, 98 a bit more regularly and have that in his back pocket when he needs it. Also, the other thing is just consistency with the off-speed pitch, whether it is a changeup or maybe he develops a curveball slider, something like that. Being able to throw that pitch more consistently and play off the fastball cutter combination, I think would be really good. With that fastball, if it does have a little bit of arm side run on it, again, I didn't see that as much in my watches of him. But either that or having that changeup, something that can go into righties a little bit more to play off of that cutter, I think would be big for him. So again, at least as far as what I saw in 2024, I think the best possible outcome for Blake Burkhalter as he is now is a back-end starter or a setup middle reliever type. But I do think, he has the ability to reach that and be that. And possibly, I don't think it would be in 2025, but he's probably going to start the year at Double-A. And again, if he continues to pitch and Double-A is a good environment for pitchers, I could see him moving up pretty quickly. Or I could see him traded for Jordan Montgomery. We'll just have to see. All right, next we'll get into some rumors around Tanner Scott. Are the Braves going to really pony up for another reliever for $16 million a year, whatever it's going to cost? Also, we'll talk about the luxury tax a little bit more and Roki Sasaki and all his meetings. Were the Braves a part of that? We'll discuss all of that here next. So there's been a lot of rumblings over the last couple of days. I don't know if people are just getting bored. People want to troll, people trying to get attention. I don't know what it is, but it feels like there's a lot of people out there talking about a potential Braves move coming soon, or that a big deal is in the works. There's been a lot of talk about Tanner Scott. And I think part of this comes from David O'Brien sending out a post on X. Somebody asked him, do the Braves have interest in Tanner Scott? And he said yes. And look, it is the point of the offseason where we are willing to run with anything because nothing has happened. And we're all so eager for something to happen that a reliable reporter saying that the Braves have interest in somebody, and we're all kind of running wild with it. And I get it. We want to be excited. We want to see something happen. But that's really all that I've seen or read, is that somebody asked David O'Brien of The Athletic, do the Braves have interest in Tanner Scott? And he replied and said yes. And that is the extent of the Braves' known interest in Tanner Scott, to my knowledge. If you know of another credible source out there that has more on that, let me know. But that's all I have seen to this point. Now, should the Braves go out and get Tanner Scott? Should they go out and sign another high-dollar reliever? That is the bigger question here in my mind. Would I love to have Tanner Scott? No doubt. He is the top reliever on the market. I don't know that we need to have another $16 million a year reliever. And I get it. Raisel Iglesias, his contract's up after this year. So, could possibly replace that, be your future closer. Look, if you go get Tanner Scott, great. I'm going to be happy. We'll jump on here. We'll do a podcast and be fantastic. But if it prevents you from going out and getting another starter, which I think is a much higher priority, if it keeps you from going out and getting a big bat for the outfield, which I think is a higher priority, then I'm be a little upset. Now maybe if Tanner Scott just happens to be the deal that AA likes, and he's not seeing a deal out there for a starter, then okay. It was the best deal that he was comfortable with. I don't know that another $16 million reliever is what this team really needs. Again, I would love to have him, but I just feel like if that move happens, that means that other moves aren't going to happen because of that move. And I'm really more worried about depth at starting pitching. I love the starting pitching the Braves have, but you need depth there. You need depth in the outfield. I mean, right now you're looking at an opening day outfield of Jared Kelenic, Michael Harris, and Brian De La Cruz. Yes, we're hoping Acuna comes back and that he comes back and looks like 2023, 2021, and before that version of Ronald Acuna Jr., and not the guy that came back from ACL the first time and the guy we saw at the beginning of 2024. But you're still talking about a Ronald that's probably going to be limited, and we don't exactly know what version of him that we're going to get coming back. If he's going to be able to run, we just don't know. You need more depth in the outfield than Brian De La Cruz and Eli White. You need more than that. So again, I'd be happy. I'd be ecstatic if they went on and got Tanner Scott, because he's one of the best relievers on the market and give you another lefty. It would be fantastic. But if that move were to prevent you from then also going out and getting quality depth in the outfield, in the rotation, I'm going to be a little upset. And that leads into this next discussion. I want to talk about the luxury tax for just a second. I really just want to call out a great article, and I want to get this guy's name right. It's a great article on battery power, written by, I believe his name was Austin. It's Reach_baseball. Austin Kane Reach wrote a great article for battery power, explaining the luxury tax, how it works, breaking it down. But he got down to what I've really been wanting to know and what I've really been trying to figure it out. I just don't have the brain power and the math power to do what Austin did in this article. What is the huge benefit of staying under the tax this year? And does it really help the Braves spend more money next offseason? Now, in Austin's article, he does a lot of guessing about the payroll. But essentially what it comes down to, and what he broke down, is that getting under the luxury tax threshold this offseason maybe saves you $4 million next year. That's just not enough, not for a team that is trying to compete and win a World Series. It should not keep them from going over the luxury tax threshold this year, because it doesn't really save you all that much for next year. Now, if you knew you weren't going to compete anytime soon and you wanted to reset that luxury tax, I get that. But when you're in a window to win a World Series and you're talking about saving $4 million by getting under the tax, and again, these numbers could vary. These are all kind of estimations. It just does not make much sense. So I hope that's not the case. And I hope they're not really trying to stay under the luxury tax. I think more than anything, these prices have been really high this offseason, and we know Alex isn't going to overpay for anything. So I think it's more so indicative of that than the team actually trying to stay under the luxury tax threshold. I do think they are going to spend, but he's going to wait for these prices to come down to where he's more comfortable spending. But go read that article. I put it on my social media page at Shortstop Ball, but you can also go check out Austin, check out his account as well. And we're in the article over at Battery Power. It's a really great article, breaking things down, taking the time to do what I've wanted to do, but just haven't been able to. So thank you so much for doing that, Austin. Roki Sasaki met with 20 teams. Was not reported whether or not the Braves were part of that. I would really hope that they are. But Roki Sasaki is now back in Japan, weighing decisions. Might also be more meetings after this as he looks to make his decision. The Braves re-signed Brian Moran to a minor league deal, a lefty reliever depth. Probably won't see him. We haven't seen him in the past 2 or 3 years, I believe, that he's been in the organization. Cubs traded Matt Mervis for Vidal Brujan. The big free agents left out there: Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Roki Sasaki, Jack Flaherty, Anthony Santander, Tanner Scott, Jerickson Profar, Jeff Hoffman. You look at that list, obviously Sasaki, Flaherty, Jeff Hoffman, Tanner Scott will be some great pitchers to go pick up. Santander, if you were able to get him 3 years, $60 million, I wouldn't hate it. I don't love the lack of average, but he certainly is a guy that can hit 35, 40 home runs. You play him in the outfield for 1 year and then move him to the DH spot. We've talked about that in the past. I think that makes a lot of sense. Profar, I'm not as big on, because I'm not really buying into what he did last year, although apparently there were some swing changes that he made. But I just feel like he's going to get overpaid for what he did last year. Maybe he's not. Maybe other teams aren't buying into that, and so he's not going to get that big money. Maybe he takes a 1-year deal and tries to prove it again, and then goes out there and tries to get that big deal if he's able to do it for another season. But I'm not in on Profar for a long-term, $15+ million a year deal. I'd do it on a 1-year deal at $15 million, something like that, to see if he could do it again. But I'm not buying into it long-term for Profar until I can see it one more time at least. But those are the big free agents left. Again, I don't know if people are getting bored or what, but it does feel like something is going to happen soon. I feel like something just needs to happen. And maybe that's why everybody feels like something is about to happen, just because we've been waiting for so long. We're about to be in 2025, and the Braves have not added anything towards the 2025 roster yet. Spring training is a month and a half away from pitchers and catchers reporting, which is great to say, but I'd feel a little bit better about it if I saw the Braves add some significant quality depth to the team. So hopefully that is going to happen. As Protect PR said, I feel like we're watching paint dry. Hopefully that's not how you feel watching or listening to this podcast, but that is how the offseason has felt so far for the Atlanta Braves. All right, thank you so much for joining today's podcast. Protect PR, Tina Churchwell, Chuck McMillan. Is Baldwin athletic enough to play left field? Del Murphy came up as a catcher and moved to the outfield. Just looking, I don't think so. But I have thought about that myself, but there's been no mention of that. And I would have to figure that with the Braves need in the outfield, that if it were a possibility, somebody would have at least asked about that or looked into it. But just for my viewings of him, I don't think so. I don't think that's the best idea. Jeffrey Humphreys, thanks for being in here. Like and subscribe. Appreciate that. Dave White, Mass Boost, thank you as well. David Thatcher, BC, Alien Johnson as well. Says, hope it's not Verlander. I've heard some of that lately. I don't mind if it's Verlander. I talked about this the other day. There's some veteran pitchers that I don't mind coming on, a Lance Lynn, a Max Scherzer, a Justin Verlander, Charlie Morton, even all four of those veterans, Jose Quintana, throw another one in there. I'd be fine with any of those veterans on a 1-year deal, depending on the price, obviously. I don't know how much is it going to take to get Justin Verlander to come in for 1 year. I'm not paying him, $20 million like you have Charlie Morton in the past, but I don't know how much he has left to offer. He'd probably be towards the bottom of that list in terms of what I think you could get from him. But I don't hate it, again, depending on the price or what he could bring you, as a new voice, a new veteran, and a leader in the clubhouse to replace Charlie Morton. Shadow Ninja, Money 2K, Jessica, thank you all for joining the podcast as well. Make sure that you do subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.